If you could please introduce yourselves.
I'm Chris. This is my wife, Kaya.
Yeah, that's me.
This is Nora.
If you could just tell me really quick what each of your ethnic background is. We'll start with Chris.
Okay. When I asked my parents what my heritage or ethnic background was, they told me I was a European Heinz, all 57 varieties.
Gotcha.
Mostly Irish, German, and a bunch of other stuff.
Okay. Okay.
And my background's Irish and English.
Okay. So starting with Kaya, since we ended with Kaya, if you could tell me a little bit about your cultural upbringing, just touching on your experiences, your personal experiences.
My cultural upbringing, I was 5 years old when my parents divorced, and I was raised in Indonesia from the time I was 5 until I was 12. And from that point, when we came back to the United States, we were just raised in a very culturally diverse area in California, where mostly I was a minority even then. So that was kind of a brief ethnic bringing up.
Okay. Chris?
So I was raised primarily in North Bend, Washington, which is a fairly rural town. Very sort of, I'd say, predominantly white there. I was there all the way through high school, and I feel like Washington in general is like a less diverse. I mean, like in high school, I think we had all of 5 kids that didn't look more or less like me.
Do you feel like you had a skewed view of other minority groups or other ethnic groups? Or do you feel like you kind of just didn't think about it too much?
I think for the most part I didn't think about it too much. It's possible that my view may have been skewed by that. Certainly if my view was coming through the media, then it would have been based on a media representation, not necessarily on, I was going to say a reality, but then that means that there is some kind of general reality, which I don't really think is the case, as opposed to experience with actual individual.
Well, I think that because of who my parents are, I don't think that necessarily I would be shaped in a bad manner. I think that because I was exposed to so many different cultures when I was a kid, that it helped me be more open to people and more understanding and more patience, especially with ethnic, really truly not just American, but ethnic groups that are still trying to hold on to their culture. And I think that being a minority in a different country also helped shape empathy and sympathy towards other people dealing with first generation migrants and that sort of thing. So yeah, I definitely think that it's helped me, and I also feel like it helps me relate to people who think that they're alone in a country, although they might not notice it because I'm white.
So I know that both of you are veterans, correct?
Yes.
And what branch were you in?
Coast Guard. I think I've experienced a lot more diversity in the church than in the military. And I'd say too that being in the military, our interaction, that color was, or ethnic background, anything like that, was pretty irrelevant to most of my interactions in the military. I interacted with these guys at work, and outside of work, it's not like I was going back and spending time with their family. I'd just be with them as an individual, them in a group. So we were just coasties. It wasn't like, oh, I'm this kind of coastie or that kind.
Right.
I think I think I would agree that in the military there is one culture, and to say that people are bringing their culture into it, I think that it kind of gets beat out of you a little bit, and you become a unit. You work together, and then people's cultural background or other things that they might be a part of them individually, but as the group as a whole, there is one culture, and that culture is the military culture.
So Chris, you mentioned diversity in the church. So if you could just expand a little bit.
So I think that, again, growing up, I grew up going to church, and the churches that I've grown up in have been representative of, you know, the society that I was in at the time. They were also predominantly white, though not exclusively. But being at Grace Community Baptist, and perhaps partially because of the area that it's in itself being more diverse. It's funny, there was a guy, and he was black, that I worked with in the Coast Guard, and we were talking about churches and whatnot, church and race, and he said, well, you know, the church is the most segregated institution in the country. I just looked at him and I said, not my church. You know, and I believe him. I don't disbelieve that, but I think that because God has redeemed for himself a people out of every tribe, tongue, people, and nation, that if a church is not more or less representative of the community that it's in, that would be indicative of a problem. Now, if a church is in a place that's predominantly black or predominantly Asian or predominantly white or what have you, and it's that way, that's no surprise. But if you're in a big mixed community and you go into a church and everybody looks the same, that's probably indicative of a real problem.
Right.
But I think it's a sign of health in our own church that we're so mixed, and yet it's not like people congregate based on any kind of appearance or even based on age. I mean, certainly we are congregated because of a common faith,
Right.
but that faith is not in any other respecter of persons and their own backgrounds and whatnot. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was thinking, you mentioned how it might have changed my views or perspective, and I was thinking that one thing I think that has, I don't know if this is only because of being in church, but I don't really know where else it would have happened. It's been fairly recent. But growing up, I think I felt like categories were pretty, I don't want to say black and white, but like, you know, I would have used the term black much more, I guess, broadly, and I feel like there's been more of an awareness in being in the church and being around a number of different people that, especially not, I guess, being particularly well educated about different cultures and whatnot, that has made me hesitant to sort of toss that label around because of the realization that, you know, I have people that, oh, a person might look a certain way to me and then realize like, oh no, you know, they're actually Dominican, or they're this, or they're that, and realize like I might be being really rude if I say like, oh, someone's whatever, and they're like, no, I'm actually not at all, you know, I'm identified as this. No, in being careful, I think in some cases it's also made me a little bit more hesitant. I mean, I know the brethren love me, but you know, it's kind of like, well, golly, I'm not sure like what term I'm supposed to use, and then I don't want to ask, you know.
Do you find that it's kind of stifling to feel so careful?
I don't think, not stifling. If there was something that I was unsure of, I'd probably just kind of try to work my way around it, unless there was a reason, you know, for me to clarify with somebody. And I think it's easier being able to come from it from the standpoint of saying like, you know, look, like, I'm sorry, I don't know this, or, you know, kind of with what might hopefully be like a humility, because I feel like I'm the one who's, you know, pretty ignorant, and you know, I should know, oh, of course these people, you know, identify this way or that way, or knowing more about different groups of people. And then for some people, you know, it might not matter to them any more than it matters to me that some of my ancestors came from Ireland.
Right,
It's
right,
been
right.
generations.
Right. Well, Chaya, seeing as you kind of have the exposed side of your marriage, do you find that you kind of knew certain things already?
There is a difference between being politically correct in the sense of not offending somebody, okay? And so we have the freedom of speech, but we don't have the freedom of offense, you know, to people. So I don't think I would go around and be like tossing a bunch of racial slurs around. But I think that I've always been really comfortable with people of different colors or anything like that. I've never felt apprehensive to ask somebody what their ethnicity was. In fact, I'm always very curious because I find it like you can kind of tell in a sense of like what region of the world they might be from, you know, and so it's always been very interesting, and I might play the guessing game, and most times I'm wrong, but I think it's better to ask than assume. And I do think I think I'm getting exposed to the American side of, because like in Indonesia, if you look different, they'll call you out on it, and then they'll make fun of, you know, whatever difference that you have. So if you're different,
they have their own terms for things that we don't have terms for here.
You know, like my dad, he really likes Asian women, and you know, he had a girlfriend for 10 years, and I'm much taller than she is. I'm almost 6 feet, and she would tell me, you know, no more tall. Okay.
When you were growing up,
or like when
taller.
I'd come home from a summer, or you know, being in the sun all the time, and my skin would be a little darker. And she said, "Oh, I like your skin this color, not the other color." I'm like, "Oh, my natural color? Like that's my entire life, you know."
Right.
Of people coming up and doing stuff like that, and so the general population of American society, I think that it actually kind of irritates me, to be honest, because I don't see it. I don't see a reason why they're acting that way, and I don't even see the reason why we should like kowtow around each other and act like we need to be just one giant gray blob, you know. I'm white, but that doesn't define me, you know. That's not who I am.
Have you found that you said something earlier, Chris, about the term black? Have you found that to be like a derogatory term? Is that something that people are not okay with, that in your experience?
Not in my experience, like somebody's, you know, I don't think I've ever had anyone say like, don't call me that or something. Not that I would go around.
No, right.
But I think, I don't know, I think especially with what has seemed like some heightened racial sensitivity in recent times, it made me a little bit more cautious about using those kinds of labels at all. I think it almost makes me feel like kind of shy away from identifying people at all versus just kind of avoiding using a label.
Okay. What would you say defines you if you had to sum yourself up?
Sum myself up, I'm Chaya. I was born almost 28 years ago. I am a Christian and a mother and a wife, not in those general orders, not that I rank one above the other, but I think that what I identify as is pretty much, I just identify as a person. I mean, I can't put one label on it, and I've done those exercises like, who am I, you know, and everybody, depending on your setting, wants to hear a certain, like, oh, you're a Christian, oh, I'm a military member, oh, I'm a woman, oh, I'm a mother, and so at the end of the day, I am Chaya, and I'm 28 years old, and I live in America.
Yeah, I'd say similarly. I think faith in Christ and belief in the Bible, being a husband, being a father, you know, possibly what I do in terms of work, because obviously you invest a lot of yourself into that. It's always annoying to me when you have to fill out like some government form or something like that, and it's like, what race are you? And I usually look for the like I don't want to answer box, because it's like, you know, why are we sort of playing this game? Why do you need to gather these statistics and label me?
So do you check boxes?
If I'm kind of like a stickler to like, I follow the rules, but if there's a like choose not to respond box, I'd usually check that.
Okay. Chaya?
I answered the question because apparently I'm white and apparently I'm from Caucasia. That's what they told me.
Yeah,
so
I don't know if my ancestors do come from the Caucasus Mountains or not.
But I know that polling or like statistics isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think we make statistics a bad thing. So if we start to identify with the statistics, then we're going to go into the forced diversity issue that we have right now. Does it make it any better to say that I'm nobody, like I'm not identifying as a race, or is there some greater good to them gathering that information and to, you know, develop some scientific method, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I usually doubt that there is. So
well, I mean, I don't know. You don't know that, you know. That's my whole thing. I mean, I just being honest. I'm not saying that there is a difference. I'm just saying that, you know, statistics are a thing, and maybe it'll identify a problem. Hey, more people are doing this than that, and how do we get them to be more like this? You know, that's also a way for them to identify a problem.
What does freedom mean? And we'll start with Chris.
Freedom. I mean, in general, freedom
Mean
is
to you.
The absence of restriction, the absence of regulation. You know what I mean? Certainly that means very specific things in certain contexts in terms of political freedom, the freedoms we have in this country. But for the most part, freedom is not necessarily equality, but liberty, the absence of restriction, regulation, telling me what I can't do or what I must do.
Are you free?
Mostly. No, I mean, not entirely. Like, we've been looking at property stuff. This is kind of off subject. We've been looking at property stuff, and there's tons of regulations, some of which may or may not be beneficial in terms of having to get permits and this, that, and the other thing, and how you can use your land. So that doesn't seem like much freedom. But, I mean, yeah, I'd say certainly for the most part, I enjoy a very large degree of freedom in this nation.
Okay.
Freedom also allows you to take responsibility for your actions. So with freedom, if I feel the freedom to say something, I should also feel the freedom to take responsibility for the consequence of that action. And I think we forget that about freedom. We just think that it's will, but not consequence in action. So that's freedom.
Right.
There's not someone taking the blame for what I do. And am I free? I am not free. I would say not in this current environment that we live in, that the progression of society that it's going. And I don't think so. But in Christ and among our people, I do think that there is freedom there. But I don't think there's freedom in the world. No. And there won't be.